You feel it every day, but no one explains it clearly. You go to the store and something feels off. The same basket, fewer items, the same effort, less reward, the same paycheck, but somehow a smaller life. And slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, you're losing, not in a dramatic way, not in a way that shocks you overnight, but in a way that erodes you, piece by piece, decision by decision, day by day. In this audiobook, Inflation Making You Poor, you are about to uncover something most people never fully understand. Not just what inflation is, but how it silently rewrites your future, how it punishes inaction, and most importantly, how you can fight back. Because here's the truth most people don't want to face. If you don't understand inflation, you are working for money that is losing value every single day. And that leads us to one powerful line you need to remember from this moment forward. If your money isn't growing, your life is shrinking. In this audiobook, we will break this down step by step. We will explore why prices keep rising, even when nothing feels different. Why your salary increases don't actually make you richer. Why saving money the traditional way might be quietly hurting you. And how to build a mindset and strategy that protects and even grows your wealth in a world where everything is getting more expensive. This is not financial advice. This is awareness. This is clarity. This is control. Because once you see what's really happening, you can't unsee it. And that's when your life starts to change. So stay with me. Because chapter 1 begins with a simple question. A question that sounds basic, but changes everything once you truly understand it. What if the problem isn't that things are getting more expensive, but that your money is getting weaker? Chapter 1, the invisible leak. There is a leak in your life. Not the kind you can see, not the kind you can hear. No dripping sound, no warning signal, no sudden collapse. Just a slow, consistent, silent drain. And the dangerous part? You've learned to live with it. You've adapted to it. You've even started blaming yourself for it. You tell yourself you need to work harder, earn more, cut back, be smarter, be better. But what if the problem isn't you? What if the game itself is designed in a way that quietly works against you? Let's break this down. Imagine this. You wake up one morning, check your bank account, and see the exact same number as yesterday. Nothing changed. No loss. No spending. Everything looks stable. But here's the reality. Even though the number stayed the same, your purchasing power didn't. Overnight, without touching your money, it became weaker. Now pause for a second. Let that sink in. You didn't lose money, but your money lost strength. That's inflation. Not loud, not dramatic, just consistent. And consistency is what makes it dangerous, because small losses, repeated daily, become massive losses over time. It's like walking on a treadmill that slowly speeds up. At first, you keep up. Then you start breathing heavier. Then you struggle. And eventually, if you don't adjust, you fall. Most people are on that treadmill right now, running harder every year, but staying in the same place, or worse, falling behind without realizing it. And here's the part no one tells you clearly. Inflation doesn't just affect prices. It affects your decisions, your mindset, your confidence, your future. It changes how you think about money. It pressures you to spend faster. It makes saving feel pointless. It creates a constant low-level stress in your life that you can't quite explain. That feeling when you walk into a store and hesitate, That moment when you check your bank account twice. That quiet anxiety when you think about the future. That's not random. That's inflation, shaping your behavior. And once you understand that, you stop blaming yourself and start changing your strategy. Because here's the truth. You cannot win a game you don't understand. Most people are playing defense. Without even knowing the rules, they think saving money is enough. They think working harder will fix it. They think stability equals safety. But in an inflation-driven world, standing still is not safe. Standing still is losing. Let me say that again, because this is where everything begins to shift. Standing still is losing. Now think about your current situation, your income, your savings, your habits. Are they designed to grow or just to survive? Because survival is no longer enough. Not in a world where everything is moving forward except your money. And this is where awareness becomes power. Because once you see the leak, you can start to fix it. But before we fix anything, you need to understand where it comes from. Because inflation is not random. It doesn't just happen. There are forces behind it, systems, decisions, patterns. And once you see those patterns, you stop reacting and start anticipating. You stop being a victim of the system and start learning how to move within it. So in the next chapter, we're going deeper. We're going to break down something that sounds simple, but controls everything. Why do prices actually rise? Not the surface explanation, not the textbook version, but the real mechanism, the hidden engine behind it all. And once you understand that, you'll never look at money the same way again, because the truth is, prices aren't just going up. Something else is happening underneath. Something most people never notice until it's too late. Dear viewer, we now have over 150 videos on our channel. That's a huge number, and we want to thank you, our viewers and subscribers, so much for that. You inspire us to create great videos every time and choose the best topics for our audiobooks. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to do so. We have big plans for this channel. Thank you. Chapter 2. The Hidden Engine. Prices don't rise by accident. They don't wake up one morning and decide to become more expensive. There is always a force behind the movement. A pressure, a push, a system quietly working in the background. And if you don't understand that system, you will always feel like life is getting harder without knowing why. So let's strip this down to something real, something you can feel. Imagine a small town, nothing fancy, just people, work, stores, and daily life. There's a bakery, a grocery shop, a mechanic, and everyone earns money, spends money, and repeats. Everything's balanced. Prices are stable. Life is predictable. Now one day, something changes. More money enters the town. Not more goods, not more services, just more money. Suddenly, people feel richer. They have more cash in their pockets, more confidence, more willingness to spend. At first, it feels like a good thing. People buy more, they upgrade, they stop hesitating. And businesses notice. The bakery starts selling out earlier. The grocery store runs low on stock. The mechanic gets booked for weeks. Demand increases, but supply doesn't. And this is where the shift begins. Because when more people want the same things, sellers have a choice. Keep prices the same and run out quickly, or raise prices and balance the demand. And almost every time they raise prices, not out of greed, but out of logic. Because if 10 people want the last 5 items, the price becomes the filter. That's the moment inflation is born. not in chaos, but in imbalance. More money chasing the same amount of things. Now here's where it gets deeper, because this isn't just about small towns. This is happening at a global level. Every time money is created faster than value, every time demand outpaces supply, every time people are encouraged to spend more than produce, inflation builds quietly, relentlessly, and the system fuels it. Loans become easier to get. Spending becomes encouraged. Consumption becomes a lifestyle. And slowly, the entire economy shifts from stability to expansion. Now expansion sounds good. Growth sounds good. But unchecked growth comes with a cost. Because if everything expands, but real value doesn't keep up, prices adjust, and they adjust upward. Here's the part most people miss. Inflation is not just about money printing, it's about behavior. It's about psychology. When people expect prices to rise, they start acting differently. They buy sooner, they spend faster, they stop waiting, and that behavior accelerates the cycle. It becomes self-reinforcing, a loop. More spending leads to higher prices, leads to fear of higher prices, leads to even more spending, and suddenly, you're not just living in inflation, you're participating in it. Without even realizing it, that's the hidden engine, not just systems, but human behavior. And this is where awareness becomes your advantage, because when you understand the engine, you stop being pulled by it. You start seeing patterns others ignore. You start questioning things most people accept. You start asking, is this purchase necessary? Or is it driven by fear? Is this urgency real? Or is it created? Is this decision helping me grow? Or just helping me keep up? Because keeping up is one of the biggest traps inflation creates. It convinces you that you need more just to stay where you are, and that pressure can quietly control your entire life. But here's the shift. The moment you stop reacting and start thinking strategically, you take back control. You don't rush, you don't panic, you don't follow the crowd. You move with intention, and that's how you begin to separate yourself from the system. Because most people will stay inside the cycle, working more, spending more, worrying more, without ever stepping back to understand what's really happening. But you're starting to see it. And once you see it, you can't go back. Because in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something even more uncomfortable, something that hits closer to home. Why your salary, even when it increases, might still be making you poorer. And once you understand that, you'll never look at a raise the same way again. Chapter 3. The salary illusion. You got a raise. You remember the moment. Maybe it was a message, a meeting, a quiet conversation that ended with a number slightly higher than before. And for a second, it felt like progress, validation, movement, proof that things were improving. You walked away thinking, I'm finally getting ahead. But let me ask you something. Did your life actually change? Or did it just feel like it should have? Because this is where one of the biggest illusions in modern life begins. The salary illusion. On paper, you earn more. But in reality, you might be standing in the exact same place. Or worse, falling behind, slowly, quietly, without noticing. Let's break this down in a way that cuts through the noise. Imagine last year, you earned a certain amount. You paid for your rent, food, transportation, small pleasures. You managed, maybe not comfortably, but you survived. Now fast forward to today. Your salary increases 5%, 10%, maybe even more. It sounds good. It looks good. But here's the real question. Did your costs stay the same? Or did they rise too? Because if your income grows, but your expenses grow faster, you didn't win. You adjusted. That's it. An adjustment is not progress. It's adaptation. And adaptation is what keeps you stuck in the cycle. This is how inflation hides in plain sight. It doesn't take everything at once. It takes a little from everywhere. Groceries cost a bit more. Rent increases slightly. Subscriptions creep up. Transportation becomes more expensive. Small things, individually manageable, but together they reshape your entire financial reality. So when your salary increases, it doesn't feel like extra money. It feels like relief. Relief from pressure that didn't exist before. And that relief is not wealth. It's recovery. Now pause for a moment, because this is where the shift happens. If your income increase only covers rising costs, you are not moving forward, you are maintaining position. And in a system driven by inflation, maintaining position is losing ground, because the baseline keeps moving. Think of it like climbing a mountain, where the ground beneath you slowly slides down. You can climb, you can push, you can improve, but if the ground is moving faster than you never reach the top. That's what inflation does. It moves the baseline, constantly, relentlessly, and most people never realize it. They celebrate raises without calculating reality. They feel richer without measuring purchasing power. They assume progress without tracking direction. And that's how years pass, with effort without elevation. Now here's the deeper truth. The system is not designed to explain this to you, because if you understood it clearly, you would behave differently. You would question your strategy. You would stop relying only on income as your path to growth. Because income alone, especially fixed income, is always chasing inflation. It's reactive, not proactive, and that's why so many people feel stuck, even when they're doing everything right, working hard, saving money, trying to be responsible, but still feeling like something isn't adding up. Because something isn't, and it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to understand it. Because once you see the illusion, you can't rely on it anymore. You have to evolve. You have to think differently. You have to build systems that don't just react to inflation, but move ahead of it. And that's where real change begins. Because in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something most people believe is safe. Something they were taught from a young age. Something that feels responsible, but might actually be holding them back. Saving money. And why, in an inflation-driven world, saving alone might be one of the biggest traps. Chapter 4. The Saving Trap. From the moment you were young, you were told something that sounded responsible, something that felt safe, something that made sense. Save your money. And on the surface, that advice is not wrong. Saving teaches discipline. It builds awareness. It creates a sense of control. But here's the truth that most people were never told. Saving money in a world of inflation, without a strategy, can quietly make you poorer. Not instantly, not dramatically, but slowly, consistently, over time. And that's what makes it dangerous, because it feels right while doing the wrong thing. Let's break this down. Imagine you take $1,000. You put it in a safe place, a bank account, a drawer, anywhere it sits still. You don't touch it, you don't spend it, you feel disciplined, you feel secure. Now fast forward 1 year, Your $1,000 is still there. Same number, same digits. Nothing changed. But everything changed because what that $1,000 can buy is now less. Not because you made a mistake, but because the value of money shifted. Prices rose, costs increased, and your money stayed still. So while you thought you were protecting it, inflation was quietly reducing it. That's the trap. And it's not obvious, because your balance doesn't go down. But your power does. Your options do. Your flexibility does. Now here's where it gets deeper. Saving without growth is like standing still on that moving treadmill. You're not going backward physically, but you're losing position. And over time, that gap becomes real. Very real. This is why many people who did everything right still struggle years later. They worked hard. They saved consistently. They avoided risk. They followed the rules, but the rules didn't adapt to the system, and the system kept moving. Now let's be clear. Saving is not the enemy. Blind saving is. Saving without understanding inflation, saving without a plan to grow, saving without a strategy, that's where the damage happens. Because money is not just something you hold. It's something that needs to move, to grow, to adapt, to work. If your money is not working, it's weakening, and that idea changes everything. Because now the question becomes, what should you do instead? Do you stop saving? Do you spend everything? Do you take risks blindly? No, that's not the answer. The answer is awareness, strategy, intentional movement. Because there are only two types of money in this world, money that sits and money that works. And only one of them survives inflation. Now think about your own habits. Where does your money sit? How long does it stay there? What is it doing while it waits? Because every day your money is inactive. Inflation is active. Every day your money is still, the system is moving. And over time, that difference compounds. This is why wealthy individuals think differently. They don't just ask, how much do I have? They ask, what is my money doing? Is it growing? Is it producing? Is it moving ahead of inflation? Because if it's not, it's falling behind. And that's the shift most people never make. They focus on accumulation instead of multiplication. They measure security by how much they hold instead of how much they build. And that mindset keeps them trapped. But once you see it, you can't ignore it, because now you understand something powerful. Saving protects you from yourself, but growth protects you from the system. And you need both, not one or the other, because discipline without strategy leads to stagnation, and strategy without discipline leads to chaos. You need balance, you need awareness, you need control, and that's exactly what we're building here, step by step, layer by layer, because in the next chapter, we're going to uncover something even more uncomfortable, something that most people feel but rarely question. Why everything feels more expensive, even when you're earning more, saving more, and trying harder than ever, because the truth is, it's not just prices rising. It's something deeper, something psychological, something that quietly reshapes your entire perception of reality. And once you understand it, you'll start seeing the world differently. Every purchase, every decision, every moment you hesitate will suddenly make sense. Dear viewers, write which city you're from. It's interesting to see which corners of the world are watching our videos. Chapter 5. The Illusion of Expensive. Have you ever walked into a store, picked something up, looked at the price, and paused? Not because you couldn't afford it, but because something inside you said, "This feels wrong." That quiet hesitation or that subtle resistance, that internal question, "Wasn't this cheaper before?" That's not your imagination. That's awareness trying to break through. Because what you're experiencing is not just higher prices, it's a shift in perception, a slow rewiring of what feels normal. And this is where inflation becomes psychological, because it doesn't just change numbers, it changes your expectations. Let's go deeper. Years ago, certain prices felt expensive. You noticed them immediately. You reacted. You questioned. But over time, as prices gradually increased, something changed. Not the speed, but your tolerance. You started accepting more, adjusting more, rationalizing more, and without realizing it, your definition of normal moved. That's how inflation wins, not by shocking you, but by training you, little by little, step by step, until one day you're paying double for something, and it doesn't even feel unusual anymore. That's the illusion, and it's powerful, because once your perception shifts, your behavior follows. You stop resisting, you stop questioning, you start adapting automatically, and that's where control slips away, because when you stop noticing, you stop protecting yourself. Think about this. If prices doubled overnight, you would react instantly. You would panic. You would demand answers. But when prices rise slowly, you adjust silently. You absorb the impact. You carry the weight. And life moves on. That's why inflation is rarely dramatic. It's strategic. It's subtle. It's patient. Now here's where it gets even deeper. Because this psychological shift doesn't just affect spending, it affects your standards. What used to feel like enough starts to feel like less. What used to feel like comfort starts to feel like pressure. And suddenly, you're chasing a moving target, trying to maintain a lifestyle that keeps getting more expensive, without realizing why. This is where many people get trapped. They don't just adapt to inflation, they build their lives around it. They upgrade when income increases, they expand when they earn more. They adjust upward without securing stability. And that creates a dangerous cycle, because every time your lifestyle grows, your financial pressure grows with it. And when inflation hits, that pressure multiplies. Now, you're not just covering basic costs, you're maintaining expectations, and expectations are expensive. This is why two people with the same income can live completely different financial lives. One adapts upward constantly, the other stays intentional. One reacts, the other observes, one follows the system, the other questions it. And over time, that difference becomes everything. Because inflation doesn't treat everyone equally. It rewards awareness, and it punishes autopilot. So the question becomes, which one are you living in? Are you reacting, or are you thinking? Are you adapting blindly, or adjusting intentionally? Because awareness is the first step out of the illusion. Once you start noticing patterns, once you start questioning changes, once you start paying attention, you regain control, and control is where power begins. Now here's a simple shift you can start making today. Before every purchase, pause just for a second. Ask yourself, is this price normal, or am I just used to it? That one question breaks the illusion. It brings awareness back into the moment. It reminds you that not everything should be accepted automatically. Because the truth is, most people don't lose money because they're reckless. They lose money because they're unconscious. They move through life, reacting instead of deciding, spending instead of thinking, adapting instead of questioning. And inflation thrives in that space. But you're not there anymore. You're starting to see. You're starting to feel the patterns. And once that awareness builds, your behavior changes, your decisions sharpen, your mindset evolves. And that's when you stop being controlled by the system and start navigating it. Because in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something that might challenge everything you've believed about stability, something that feels safe, but might actually be the biggest risk of all: your job, your income, your sense of security. Because in an inflation-driven world, the idea of safe income might not be as safe as it seems. And once you understand why, you'll start thinking differently about how you earn, not just how you spend. Chapter 6, The Stability Myth. There is a sentence most people grow up believing, a sentence that sounds responsible, safe, predictable. Get a stable job. And for decades, that advice made sense. Consistency meant security. A steady paycheck meant peace of mind. Routine meant control. But here's the uncomfortable truth in today's world. Stability without growth is one of the biggest risks you can take, not because stability is bad, but because the world around it is changing faster than ever. And inflation does not respect stability. Let's break this down. Imagine you have a job, reliable monthly income, same amount every month. You know what's coming in. You plan your life around it. It feels secure. Now look at the world outside that job. Prices are rising. Costs are shifting. Everything is moving. Your income stays still. And right there, a gap begins to form. At first it's small, almost invisible. But over time, it grows because the world is moving forward and your income isn't keeping up. That's the myth of stability. It gives you the feeling of safety, while slowly exposing you to risk. Because in an inflation-driven world, the biggest danger is not losing income. It's losing value. And if your income doesn't grow with that value, you're quietly falling behind. Now here's where it gets deeper. Most people don't notice this immediately because the change is gradual. They adjust their spending, they cut small costs, they adapt, and life continues. But years later, they look around and wonder, why does everything feel harder? Why does money feel tighter even though I'm earning more? Why am I working more but progressing less? That's the cost of relying only on stability, because stability without evolution leads to stagnation, and stagnation in an inflationary system is decline. Now let's shift perspective. There are two types of income in this world: fixed income and adaptive income. Fixed income stays the same. It depends on time, hours, effort. You trade your time for money. Adaptive income evolves. It grows, it adjusts, it scales. It's not tied only to time, but to value. And in a world where everything is changing, adaptive income survives. Fixed income struggles. This doesn't mean you need to quit your job. It doesn't mean stability is useless. It means stability alone is not enough. You need layers. You need flexibility. You need growth. Because relying on one stream in a changing system is like standing on one leg during an earthquake. Eventually, you lose balance. And here's the part most people avoid thinking about. Your job is not just a source of income. It's a system you depend on. And every system has limits. Limits on growth, limits on control, limits on speed. And when inflation accelerates, those limits become visible. Suddenly, raises don't feel enough. Bonuses don't change much. effort doesn't translate the way it used to. And that creates frustration, not because you're doing something wrong, but because the structure itself has boundaries. Now here's the shift. Once you see this, you stop depending on one path. You start building alternatives, not out of fear, but out of awareness. You start asking, how can I create income that grows with the system, not behind it? How can I build something that scales, not just repeats? How can I make my effort compound instead of reset every month? Because that's the real difference. Compounding versus repeating. Most people repeat effort. Every month starts from zero. They work, they earn, they spend, and the cycle resets. But those who understand the system build compounding structures, things that grow over time, things that don't reset, things that move forward even when they rest. And that's how they stay ahead of inflation, not by working harder, but by working differently. Now pause for a moment, because this is where your thinking begins to shift. You don't need to abandon stability. You need to upgrade it. You need to transform it from a single pillar into a foundation, a base, not the entire structure, because real security does not come from one source. It comes from multiple layers working together. Income, growth, awareness, strategy. And once those layers are in place, inflation stops being a threat and starts becoming something you can navigate, even leverage. But before we go there, you need to understand one more critical piece, something that shapes every financial decision you make, without you even realizing it, your habits. Because inflation doesn't just affect your wallet, it shapes your daily behavior, your routines, your choices, your patterns. And in the next chapter, we're going to break that down, how inflation quietly rewires your habits, and how those habits can either trap you deeper or help you break free. Because the truth is, you don't just fight inflation with money, you fight it with behavior. And most people are losing that battle without even knowing it. Chapter 7. The Habit Loop. Most people think inflation lives in numbers, prices, charts, percentages. But that's only the surface, because the real battlefield of inflation is your behavior, your daily choices, your automatic decisions, your habits. And here's the part that changes everything. You don't experience inflation once a year. You experience it every single day, in small moments, quiet decisions, unnoticed patterns. Let's slow this down. Think about your morning. You wake up, you grab your phone, you scroll, you move through your routine, coffee, breakfast, commute. Somewhere in that routine, you make spending decisions, small ones, quick ones, almost automatic. You don't analyze them deeply, you don't question them every time, because they feel normal. But here's the truth. Those small decisions are where inflation does its most powerful work. Because when prices rise slowly, your habits adjust silently. You don't consciously decide to spend more. You just do. A slightly more expensive coffee, a slightly higher delivery fee, a slightly bigger bill, and your brain adapts. It recalibrates. It says, this is the new normal. That's the habit loop. Trigger, action, normalization. And once that loop is established, it runs automatically. Now, here's where it becomes dangerous, because habits don't just repeat, they compound. A small increase in daily spending, multiplied over weeks, over months, over years, becomes a massive shift. Not because of one big decision, but because of hundreds of small ones. And most people never track it. They don't see the pattern. They only feel the pressure, that quiet sense that money disappears faster, that things cost more, that life feels tighter. But they can't point to one clear reason, because it's not one reason, it's a pattern. Now here's the deeper layer. Inflation doesn't just increase costs. It increases urgency. It creates a subtle pressure to act now, to buy now, to not wait. Because it might be more expensive later. And that thought becomes a trigger. You start making decisions based on fear instead of strategy. You accelerate your spending. You justify purchases. You move faster. And speed is where mistakes happen. Because when you move fast, you don't evaluate, you react. And reactive behavior is exactly what inflation feeds on. Now pause, take a breath, because this is where control begins. Awareness of your habits is the first step to breaking the loop. You don't need to change everything overnight. You don't need to become perfect. You just need to start noticing, start observing, start questioning. Why did I buy this? Was it intentional or automatic? Was it necessary or triggered? That awareness interrupts the loop. It creates space, and in that space, you regain control. Because habits are powerful, but they're not permanent. They can be reshaped, redirected, rebuilt. And once you take control of your habits, you take control of your response to inflation, you stop being reactive, you start being intentional, you slow down, you think, you decide, and that shift changes everything, because now you're not just earning money, you're directing it, you're managing it, you're protecting it, and that's how you begin to build resilience, not just financially, but mentally, because discipline is your first line of defense against inflation, not income, not luck, not timing. Discipline, the ability to pause, think, and act with intention. Now here's something powerful to carry with you. Small habits don't just shape your day, they shape your future. And in an inflation-driven world, your future depends on how you manage those small decisions every single day. Now, as we move forward, we're going to build on this foundation, because understanding habits is just the beginning. In the next chapter, we're going to explore something that drives those habits even deeper, something invisible but incredibly powerful, your emotions. Because inflation doesn't just change what you do, it changes how you feel. Stress, fear, uncertainty, and those emotions can either push you into bad decisions or guide you toward better ones, if you know how to control them. So the question becomes, are your emotions driving your financial decisions, or are you in control of them? Because that answer will determine everything that comes next. Chapter 8. The emotional cost. Inflation is not just something you calculate, it's something you feel. Not in spreadsheets, not in reports, but in moments. Quiet, personal, everyday moments. That slight tension when you tap your card, that hesitation before clicking buy, that internal calculation you didn't use to make. Do I really need this? Can I justify this? Should I wait? Those questions, they weren't always this loud, but now they are. And that's not random. That's the emotional cost of inflation. Because when money loses value, confidence often follows. Let's go deeper. Imagine two versions of your life. One where prices are stable, predictable, comfortable. You know what things cost. You trust your planning. You move with certainty. Now compare that to a world where prices constantly shift, where nothing feels fixed, where what worked last year doesn't work the same way today. That uncertainty creates pressure, and pressure changes behavior. You become more cautious, more reactive, more sensitive to risk, and sometimes more impulsive. Because here's the paradox. Inflation creates two opposite emotional reactions: fear and urgency. Fear tells you to hold back, to protect, to avoid risk. Urgency tells you to act fast, to buy now, to not miss out. And most people bounce between the two, saving too tightly in one moment, spending too quickly in the next, and that inconsistency is where control is lost. Because decisions driven by emotion rarely follow strategy. They follow feeling, and feelings change constantly. Now here's something most people never stop to consider. Your financial life is not just a math problem, it's an emotional system. Every decision you make is influenced by how you feel in that moment. Confident or uncertain, calm or stressed, focused or distracted. And inflation quietly destabilizes those emotions. It creates background noise, a low-level anxiety that never fully disappears. You might not even notice it consciously, but it shows up in your behavior, in your hesitation, in your overthinking, in your second-guessing, and over time, that emotional weight builds. Now here's the turning point, because once you recognize this, you stop letting emotion control your decisions, and you start building systems that protect you from emotional swings, because discipline is not just about action, it's about emotional control, the ability to stay steady when everything around you is shifting, the ability to think clearly when pressure rises, the ability to act intentionally, even when your instincts say react. That's power, real power, because in a world driven by inflation, the strongest advantage is not just knowledge, it's stability, internal stability. Now ask yourself this: when you make financial decisions, are you calm or are you reacting? Are you thinking long-term or solving short-term discomfort? Because those two approaches lead to completely different outcomes. One builds resilience, the other builds cycles, and cycles are what keep people stuck. Now here's a simple but powerful shift. Before making any financial decision, pause, not just to think, but to feel. Ask yourself, what emotion is driving this decision? Is it fear? Is it pressure? Is it urgency? Or is it clarity? Because clarity feels different. It's calm, it's steady, it doesn't rush, and decisions made from clarity are almost always stronger. Now, this doesn't mean you eliminate emotion. That's not possible. It means you become aware of it. You understand it, you manage it, and once you do, you stop being pulled in different directions. You become grounded, focused, intentional, and that changes everything. Because now, you're not just reacting to inflation. You're navigating it with control, with awareness, with strategy. Now, as we move forward, we're going to shift from understanding to action, because awareness without action does not create change. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about the first real step to beating inflation, not in theory, but in practice. A shift in mindset that separates those who struggle from those who adapt. Because the truth is, you don't beat inflation by fighting it directly. You beat it by becoming someone it can't keep up with. And that starts with how you think. We'd also like to remind you that we have a private members community on our channel. All members can vote on the topic of the next video, have priority in the comment section, and, most importantly, gain access to exclusive videos and lessons covering the most relevant topics and information specific to this month. Thank you. Let's keep moving forward. Chapter 9. the shift. There is a moment in every person's life where awareness becomes a decision. Not just understanding, not just listening, but choosing. Because now you see it. The system, the patterns, the silent erosion, you feel it differently now. And once you feel it, you cannot go back to autopilot. This is where the shift begins. Not in your bank account, not in your income, but in your mind. Because before you change your strategy, you must change your identity. You must stop seeing yourself as someone trying to keep up and start seeing yourself as someone who moves ahead. That shift changes everything. Let's make this real. Most people approach money like this. How do I survive this month? How do I manage these expenses? How do I get through? That mindset is reactive. It's focused on pressure. It's focused on maintaining. And in an inflation-driven world, that mindset keeps you stuck. Because survival thinking never builds expansion. Now compare that to a different question. How do I grow beyond this system? How do I create leverage? How do I make my effort multiply? That's a different energy, different direction, different outcome. Because growth thinking looks for opportunity inside pressure. Now here's the truth. Inflation is not just a problem, it's a filter. It separates people, not by luck, but by mindset. Some people will feel trapped, others will adapt, some will complain, others will reposition. And over time, that difference becomes massive because the system rewards those who move with it, not those who resist blindly. Now, this doesn't mean accepting everything. It means understanding the rules and playing smarter because every system has patterns, and patterns can be used once you see them. Now, here's the first real shift you need to make. Stop measuring your progress in income. Start measuring your progress in growth, because income can rise and still leave you behind. But growth changes your trajectory. Growth builds skills, awareness, opportunities, and those things compound. Now think about your current situation. If everything stayed the same, your job, your income, your habits, where would you be in 5 years? Better or just older? That question is uncomfortable, but necessary, because it forces you to face reality. And reality is where change begins. Now here's the next shift. You need to stop trading only time for money and start building systems where your effort continues to work, even when you stop, because time is limited. But systems can scale. And in a world where inflation is constant, scalability becomes your advantage. Now, this doesn't mean overnight success. It doesn't mean quitting everything. It means starting small, intentional, consistent, because every system you build, every skill you develop, every layer you add moves you further away from dependence and closer to control. Now let me give you something simple but powerful. Don't just earn money, position yourself to grow it. That's the shift. From earning to building, from reacting to designing, from surviving to expanding. Now here's where most people hesitate. They think, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I don't know where to start. But the truth is, you don't need everything figured out. You need direction. And direction starts with awareness, which you now have. So the next step is action. And in the next chapter, we're going to break that down. Practical, clear, real. How to start building momentum, even if you feel behind, even if you feel uncertain. Because the truth is, you're not behind. You're just becoming aware. And awareness is the beginning of power. but only if you use it. Chapter 10. Momentum. Most people wait for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, the perfect clarity. But here's the truth. Momentum doesn't come from perfection. It comes from movement. Small movement. Imperfect movement. But consistent movement. Because in a world shaped by inflation, standing still is the only guaranteed way to lose. Now think about this. You don't wake up one day and suddenly beat inflation. There is no single decision that fixes everything. No shortcut. No instant escape. What you build instead is momentum. Layer by layer, decision by decision, and over time, that momentum becomes your advantage. Let's make this practical right now. You have 3 powerful levers in your life, 3 areas you can control, even in an unpredictable system. Your income, your spending, your growth. Most people focus on one. Some try to manage 2. Very few master all 3. But that's where momentum is built, not in one big move, but in aligning all 3 together. Let's start with the first one, income. You already understand that fixed income alone is not enough. So the question becomes, what can you build alongside it? Not something overwhelming, not something unrealistic, something small, something consistent. Because even a small additional stream changes your trajectory. It reduces pressure. It creates options. It gives you flexibility. And flexibility is power. Now move to the second lever. Spending. This is where awareness turns into control. You don't need to eliminate everything. You don't need to live restricted, but you do need to become intentional. Because every dollar you direct consciously becomes a tool instead of a reaction. Now here's the shift. Stop asking, how can I spend less? Start asking, how can I spend smarter? Because reduction without intention creates frustration, but strategy creates control. Now the third lever, growth. This is the one most people underestimate because it doesn't give instant results. It feels slow, invisible, but it's the most powerful of all because growth compounds skills, knowledge, awareness. These are assets that inflation cannot take from you. In fact, they become more valuable over time. Now imagine this. You improve one skill, just one, something that increases your value, your ability, your opportunities. At first, nothing dramatic happens, but over time, that skill opens doors, creates income, builds leverage, and suddenly, you're not just keeping up, you're moving ahead. That's the power of growth. Now here's where everything connects. Income gives you resources. Spending gives you control. Growth gives you expansion. And when those 3 align, momentum begins. Not explosive, not overnight, but steady, reliable, real. Now let me give you something to hold on to. Small, consistent action beats perfect delayed action. Because most people delay. They wait, they overthink, and while they wait, the system keeps moving, inflation keeps rising, time keeps passing, and opportunity keeps shifting. But when you move, even slowly, you start building something, and that something becomes everything. Now, I want you to ask yourself one simple question. What is one small action I can take today that moves me forward? Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Because momentum doesn't start in the future. It starts now with one decision, one action, one step. And once you take that step, you're no longer stuck. You're moving, and movement is the beginning of change. Now, as we move into the next chapter, we're going to go deeper into something that amplifies momentum, something that turns small actions into exponential results. Leverage. Because the truth is, effort alone is not enough. You need leverage, and once you understand how to use it, everything accelerates. Chapter 11. Leverage. There is a limit to how much you can work, a limit to how many hours you can give, a limit to how much energy you can push through a single day. And if your entire financial life depends on that limit, you are always vulnerable. Because inflation doesn't slow down when you get tired. It doesn't pause when you need rest. It keeps moving relentlessly. That's why effort alone is not enough. You need leverage. Now let's strip this word down. Leverage is simple. It means getting more results from the same amount of effort. Or even better, getting results without repeating the effort. And once you understand this, you stop thinking in hours and start thinking in systems. Because time is linear, but leverage is exponential. Let's make this real. Imagine two people. Both work hard, both earn money, both try to improve their lives. The first person relies only on effort. They work, they get paid, they stop working, income stops, everything resets every single time. The second person uses leverage. They still work, but they build something alongside that work. A skill, a system, a platform, something that continues to produce, even when they are not actively working. At first, there's no visible difference. They look the same. They earn similar amounts. They live similar lives. But over time, the gap begins because one person is repeating effort and the other is multiplying it. And multiplication always wins over repetition. Now here's the key. Leverage doesn't start big. It starts small. It starts with a simple shift in thinking. Instead of asking, how can I earn more today? You start asking, how can I make this effort work again tomorrow without repeating it? That question changes everything because now you're not just working, you're building. Now, here are 3 forms of leverage you need to understand. The first, skill leverage. This is where you develop something that increases your value, not just in one place, but across multiple opportunities. A skill that can be used, scaled, expanded, because when your value increases, your earning potential follows. And that's how you stay ahead of inflation. The second, time leverage. This is where you create systems that free your time, not by doing less, but by doing smarter, automating, structuring, simplifying, because every hour you free can be reinvested into growth, and growth is where momentum accelerates. The third, asset leverage. This is where your money or your work creates something that produces value over time, something that doesn't require constant input, something that grows. This is the level where things begin to shift dramatically, because now you're not just earning money, you're creating sources, and sources change everything. Now pause for a moment, because this is where most people get overwhelmed. They think, I don't have time for this. I don't know where to start. It feels too complicated. But here's the truth. You don't need to build everything at once. You need to start with one skill, one system, one step. Because leverage compounds, just like inflation, but in your favor. Now let me give you something powerful. If you only get paid when you work, you will always be chasing, because time is limited. But leverage expands what's possible. Now imagine this. You build something small, something simple. It doesn't change your life overnight, but it adds something, a small stream, a small advantage. Then you build another layer, another system, another skill, and over time, those layers stack, they grow, they connect, and suddenly you're not just earning, you're generating. You're not just reacting, you're creating. And that's how you step out of the cycle, not by working harder, but by working differently. Now here's the shift you need to carry forward. Don't just work for money, build things that work for you. Because inflation punishes effort alone, but it struggles against leverage. And the more leverage you build, the less control inflation has over your life. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to take this even deeper because leverage is powerful, but it needs direction. Without direction, it becomes scattered. And scattered effort does not compound. So we're going to talk about focus, how to choose the right path, the right skill, the right direction, so that your effort doesn't just move, but multiplies. Because the truth is, you don't need to do everything. You need to do the right things. Consistently. If you like this audiobook, please give it a like. It will really help us promote the video. Chapter 12. Focus. Leverage without focus is noise. Effort without direction is wasted energy. And in a world where everything is competing for your attention, focus becomes your greatest advantage. Because here's the truth most people never confront. You don't lose to inflation because you lack opportunity. You lose because your energy is scattered, pulled in different directions, distracted by noise, diluted across too many things that don't move you forward. And the system thrives on that distraction. Constant notifications, endless content, quick dopamine hits, all designed to keep you busy, but not progressing, because a distracted mind cannot build momentum. And without momentum, you stay in the cycle. Now let's slow this down. Think about how you spend your time, not what you say you'll do, not what you plan, but what actually happens. How many hours disappear into things that don't build you? Scrolling, consuming, reacting, waiting, and here's the uncomfortable part. Most people are not losing because they don't have time. They're losing because they don't protect it. Because time is your most valuable resource, and focus is how you direct it. Now here's where everything changes. You don't need more time. You need more intention with the time you already have. Because even one focused hour a day can change your trajectory, not instantly, but inevitably. This idea echoes something powerful from high-performing mindsets, that small, consistent time investments compound into massive transformation. But here's the difference. Most people don't stay consistent. They start, they stop, they switch, they chase something new. And every time they reset, they lose progress. That's why focus matters, because focus builds depth, and depth creates results. Now imagine this. Instead of trying to do everything, you choose one direction, one skill, one path, and you commit to it, not for a week, not for motivation, but for consistency, day after day, even when it feels slow, even when results are invisible. Because here's the truth. Real progress is quiet. It doesn't shout. It doesn't announce itself. It builds silently until one day it shows. And that's when people call it sudden success. But it was never sudden. It was focused. Now here's where most people go wrong. They chase excitement instead of alignment. They follow trends. Instead of building strength, they jump between ideas instead of mastering one. And that constant switching destroys momentum, because every time you restart, you go back to zero. And in a system that's constantly moving forward, restarting is losing. Now here's the shift. You need to decide, what am I building? Not what looks good, not what feels exciting, but what actually moves you forward. And once you decide, you protect it. You protect your time, your energy, your attention. Because focus is not just about choosing something, it's about eliminating everything else. And that's where discipline comes in. The ability to say no to distractions, to noise, to things that don't align. Because every yes to distraction is a no to your future. Now let me give you something powerful to carry. Where your focus goes, your future follows. And in an inflation-driven world, your future depends on how you use your time today, not tomorrow, not someday, today. Now ask yourself this: what are you currently focused on? Is it building you or just entertaining you? Is it moving you forward or keeping you comfortable? Because comfort is where growth stops, and growth is what keeps you ahead of inflation. Now here's a simple shift you can start immediately. Create one protected hour, just one, every day. No distractions, no interruptions, no excuses. And use that hour to build something, a skill, a system, a plan, something that moves your life forward. Because that 1 hour is not just time. It's leverage, it's momentum, it's transformation in progress. Now, as we move into the next chapter, we're going to connect everything together because focus creates direction. But direction needs structure, and structure is what turns effort into results. We're going to talk about systems, how to build simple, powerful systems that keep you moving forward even when motivation fades, because motivation is temporary, but systems, they last. And in a world that never stops moving, you need something that keeps you steady, something that keeps you progressing no matter what. Chapter 13, Systems. Motivation will fail you, not because you're weak, not because you don't want it enough, but because motivation is temporary. It comes and goes. It rises and it disappears. And if your progress depends on something that disappears, your progress will disappear too. That's why systems matter, because systems don't rely on how you feel. They rely on what you've built. Now, let's make this clear. A system is not something complicated. It's not a perfect routine. It's not a rigid schedule. A system is simply a structure that keeps you moving forward, even when you don't feel like it. And in a world driven by inflation, consistency beats intensity every single time, because small repeated actions compound just like inflation does, but in your favor. Now imagine this. 2 people want to improve their financial life. The first relies on motivation. They act when they feel inspired. They stop when they don't. They go through cycles, up and down, start and stop. The second builds a system. They decide when they will act, how they will act, and they follow it regardless of how they feel. At first, there's no visible difference. But over time, the gap becomes undeniable, because one person is driven by emotion and the other is guided by structure, and structure creates results. Now here's the key. Your system doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be repeatable, simple, clear, sustainable. Because if it's too complex, you won't follow it. And if you don't follow it, it doesn't work. Now let's break this into something practical. There are 3 systems you need to build. The first, a money system. This is how you manage your income, your spending, your decisions, not randomly, not emotionally, but intentionally. A simple structure that tells you where your money goes, what it does, and why. Because when your money has direction, it stops disappearing and starts working. The second, a growth system. This is your protected time, your daily investment into yourself, your skill, your future. It doesn't have to be long, but it has to be consistent, because growth doesn't come from intensity. It comes from repetition, and repetition builds transformation. The third, a decision system. This is how you think, how you evaluate, how you choose, because decisions shape everything, and most people make decisions based on emotion, impulse, pressure. But when you build a system, you remove chaos. You create clarity. Now, instead of reacting, you follow a process. You ask better questions. You think longer term. You act with intention. And that changes your entire trajectory. Now pause for a moment, because this is where everything connects. Inflation is a system. It moves consistently, relentlessly, predictably, and the only way to counter a system is with a system, not random effort, not occasional discipline, but structured action, repeated over time. Now let me give you something to hold on to. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems, because goals are ideas, but systems are execution, and execution is what creates results. Now here's where most people hesitate. They think, I'll start when I'm ready. I'll build it later. I need more time. But the truth is, you don't build systems when it's easy. You build them because it's necessary, because without them, you drift, and drifting in an inflation-driven world is losing. Now here's a simple starting point. Create a daily structure, just one. One system you follow every day. It could be tracking your spending, building a skill for 1 hour, reviewing your decisions, something small but consistent. Because consistency is what builds momentum, and momentum is what builds change. Now, as we move into the next chapter, we're going to take this even further, because systems create structure. But structure alone is not enough. You need something else, something deeper, something that drives your consistency, even when it's hard. Discipline. Because without discipline, even the best system fails. And once you understand how to build it, you become unstoppable. Not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger. Chapter 14. Discipline. There is a moment, quiet, unseen, almost invisible, where everything is decided, not in the big moves, not in the dramatic changes, but in the small moments when you don't feel like doing what you know you should. That's where discipline lives, not in motivation, not in excitement, but in resistance, because discipline is not about doing what's easy, it's about doing what's necessary, even when it feels uncomfortable. And in a world shaped by inflation, discipline is not optional, it's survival. Let's make this real. You already know what to do. Save intentionally, spend wisely, build skills, create leverage, stay focused. You know it, but knowing is not enough. Because without discipline, knowledge stays unused, potential stays unrealized, and life stays the same. Now here's the truth most people avoid. Discipline is not something you wait for. It's something you force. Not aggressively, not painfully, but consistently. Because every time you choose action over comfort, you strengthen it. And every time you choose comfort over action, you weaken it. That's the battle. Every single day. Now think about your routine. How many times do you delay something important? How many times do you say later, and later never comes? That's not lack of knowledge. That's lack of discipline. And here's the cost. Every delay pushes your progress further away. Every excuse builds a habit, and habits shape your future. This is why discipline matters more than motivation, because motivation is temporary, but discipline is reliable. It shows up, even when you don't feel like it. Now let's connect this to inflation, because this is where it becomes real. Inflation rewards discipline and punishes inconsistency. If you spend without thinking, you lose faster. If you delay growth, you fall behind. If you avoid building systems, you stay trapped. But if you stay consistent, even in small ways, you begin to separate yourself. You begin to move differently. You begin to think differently. And over time, that difference becomes everything. Now here's the shift. Stop asking, how do I feel today? Start asking, what needs to be done? Because feelings change, but requirements don't. Your future doesn't care how you feel. It responds to what you do. Now this doesn't mean ignoring yourself. It means leading yourself. Because discipline is self-leadership. It's the ability to direct your actions instead of being controlled by your emotions. And that's where real power begins. Now let me give you something simple but powerful. Discipline is choosing what you want most over what you want now. Because what you want now is often comfort, ease, distraction. But what you want most requires effort, consistency, focus. And every time you choose long-term over short-term, you move forward. Now here's where most people struggle. They try to change everything at once. They overwhelm themselves, they burn out, and then they stop. But discipline doesn't work like that. It builds gradually, one decision at a time, one habit at a time, one action at a time, because small wins create confidence, and confidence strengthens discipline. Now here's a practical shift you can start immediately. Pick one thing, just one, something that moves your life forward, and commit to it daily. No negotiation, no excuses. Even when it's inconvenient, even when it's boring, even when it feels small. Because consistency is what builds strength, and strength is what carries you through. Now pause for a moment, because this is where everything becomes real. You don't beat inflation with one big move. You beat it with daily discipline, repeated actions, structured behavior, intentional decisions, day after day. Because while the system moves consistently, so can you. And if you stay consistent long enough, you don't just keep up, you move ahead. Now, as we move into the next chapter, we're going to bring everything together because discipline creates action. But action needs direction, and direction needs clarity. We're going to talk about vision, because without a clear vision, even discipline becomes scattered, and scattered effort does not create freedom. But focused effort, driven by a clear vision, that's where transformation happens. And that's where your life begins to change. For real. Hey there, we want to remind you that we often choose topics suggested by you, our viewers, in the comments. In the comments, you can suggest a topic or ask a question about what you'd like to see in our video. We read every comment carefully, so we promise not to miss a single one. Thank you. Let's keep going. Chapter 15. Vision. There is something more dangerous than not having money, something more limiting than inflation, something more destructive than lack of opportunity, and that is moving without direction. Because when you don't know where you're going, every step feels like effort, but none of it creates progress. You stay busy, you stay active, you stay tired. But you don't move forward. That's what happens without vision. And in a world where everything is constantly changing, vision is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Now let's make this clear. Vision is not just a dream. It's not a vague idea of doing better. It's clarity, specific, intentional, directed. It's knowing what you are building and why. Because when you have vision, your decisions align, your actions connect, your effort compounds. But without it, everything feels random, scattered, disconnected, and scattered effort does not beat inflation. Now think about your current path. Why are you working? Why are you earning? Why are you trying to improve? Is it clear or is it just routine? Because routine without direction leads to repetition, and repetition without growth leads to stagnation. Now here's the shift. You need to define where you're going, not perfectly, not completely, but clearly enough that your actions start to align. Because once you know your direction, everything changes. You stop chasing everything. You start choosing intentionally. You stop reacting to opportunities. You start filtering them. You stop wasting time. You start investing it. And that's where momentum accelerates. Now, here's something powerful to understand. Vision reduces noise. It eliminates distractions. Because when you know what matters, everything else becomes easier to ignore. And in today's world, that is a superpower. Now let's go deeper. Your vision doesn't have to be massive. It doesn't have to impress anyone. It just needs to be real to you. Because the purpose of vision is not to look good. It's to guide you, to keep you grounded, to remind you why you're doing what you're doing, especially when it gets hard. Now ask yourself this: if nothing changed, if you kept living exactly the way you are right now, where would you end up? Really think about it, because that answer is your default future. And if that future doesn't excite you, then something needs to change. Not someday. Now. Now, here's the next step. Define your direction. What do you want your life to look like in 5 years? Not in vague terms, but in real terms. Your income, your lifestyle, your freedom, your time. What does that look like? Because clarity creates focus, and focus creates progress. Now here's the connection. Inflation pushes everything forward: costs, expectations, pressure. And if you don't have a vision, you get pulled along, you react, you adapt, you follow. But when you have vision, you lead, you decide, you move intentionally. And that changes everything. Because now, you're not just responding to the system, you're navigating it with purpose. Now, let me give you something to hold on to. If you don't design your future, the system will design it for you. And the system is not designed for your freedom. It's designed for movement, consumption, continuation. So, if you want something different, you have to build it deliberately. Now here's where vision becomes powerful. It connects everything you've learned so far. Your discipline now has direction. Your focus now has purpose. Your systems now have alignment. And your actions now have meaning. And meaning is what keeps you going when motivation fades. Now here's a simple exercise. Take a moment and write down one clear outcome you want. One, not 10, not everything, just one. Something meaningful, something real. And then ask yourself, what do I need to do daily to move toward this? That's your starting point, because vision without action is just imagination. But vision with action is transformation. Now, as we move into the next chapter, we're going to take this one step further, because vision shows you where to go, but execution is what gets you there. And execution requires something specific, something most people underestimate: consistency at scale. Because doing something once doesn't change your life. Doing it repeatedly does. And that's what we're going to break down next. How to turn your vision into real measurable progress that moves you ahead, no matter what the system does. Chapter 16, Execution. Vision shows you where to go, but execution is what decides if you ever get there, because there is a harsh truth most people avoid. Knowing what to do does not change your life. Doing it repeatedly does. And that's where execution separates people. Not intelligence, not talent, not luck, execution. Now let's make this real. You already have awareness. You understand inflation. You see the patterns. You know the risks. You've started thinking differently, but none of that matters if it doesn't translate into action. Because ideas without execution are just potential, and potential does not protect you from inflation. Now here's the shift. Execution is not about doing everything, it's about doing the right things consistently, even when it feels slow, even when results are invisible, because real progress is not immediate, it's delayed, and most people quit in that delay. They act for a few days, a few weeks, maybe a month, and when they don't see results, they stop, they doubt, they reset, and every reset costs them momentum. Now here's the truth. Execution requires patience, not passive patience, active patience, the kind where you keep moving, even when you don't see the outcome yet, because outcomes follow consistency, not the other way around. Now think about this. If you build something for one day, nothing changes. If you build something for 1 week, still nothing obvious. But if you build something for 1 year, everything changes. That's execution at scale, not intensity, but repetition. Now here's where most people get it wrong. They try to do too much, too fast, too perfectly, and they burn out, because perfection is the enemy of execution. You don't need perfect action. You need consistent action. Now let me give you something powerful. Execution beats intention every single time, because intention feels good. It creates the illusion of progress, but execution creates results. Now here's a practical way to think about this. Break your vision into daily actions, not big goals, not overwhelming tasks, small, repeatable steps, something you can do every single day, no matter what. Because consistency removes excuses. It simplifies everything, and simplicity is what makes execution sustainable. Now here's the deeper layer. Execution is not just about action, it's about identity. Because every time you follow through, you reinforce who you are. You become someone who executes, someone who finishes, someone who builds. And that identity changes your future, because you stop asking, "Can I do this?" and start saying, "I am someone who does this." Now pause for a moment, because this is where everything connects. Inflation is consistent, relentless, unstoppable. And the only way to counter something consistent is with something equally consistent. Your execution, your daily actions, your discipline in motion. Because while others react, you build. While others hesitate, you move. While others wait, you execute. And over time, that difference becomes massive. Now here's a simple rule to carry with you. Never miss twice. If you skip a day, fine, but don't skip the next. Because consistency is not about perfection, it's about recovery. The ability to get back on track immediately, without excuses, without delay. Now ask yourself this. What are you currently executing on? Not thinking about, not planning, executing, because that answer defines your future, not your ideas, not your intentions, your actions. Now, as we move into the next chapter, we're going to deepen this even further because execution builds momentum. But momentum needs protection because once you start moving, the world will try to pull you back. Distractions, doubts, external pressure, and if you're not prepared for that, you lose momentum. So we're going to talk about resilience, how to stay on track, even when life pushes against you. Because the truth is, it will. And your ability to handle that pressure will determine whether you break or break through. Chapter 17, Resilience. At some point, it gets hard, not in theory, not in ideas, but in reality. You wake up tired, your motivation drops, your progress feels slow, life gets busy, unexpected expenses show up, distractions pull you away, and suddenly, everything you were building feels heavier. This is where most people stop, not because they can't continue, but because they don't know how to handle resistance. And resistance is part of the process. Not an obstacle, not a sign to quit, but a signal that you're moving in the right direction. Because anything that creates change creates friction. And if you're not prepared for that friction, you lose momentum. Now let's make this clear. Resilience is not about avoiding difficulty. It's about continuing despite it. It's the ability to stay consistent, even when things don't go as planned, even when progress feels invisible, even when you question yourself. And in a world driven by inflation, resilience becomes essential because the system will test you constantly. Unexpected costs, sudden changes, moments of pressure. And if you react emotionally, you lose control. But if you stay grounded, you adapt. Now here's the truth most people avoid. You will have setbacks. You will make mistakes. You will have days where you don't execute. That's not failure. That's part of the process. Failure only happens when you don't return, because resilience is about returning again and again, no matter what. Now, think about this. Two people start the same journey, both motivated, both focused, both committed. The first one stops at the first sign of difficulty. The second one pauses, adjusts, and continues. At first, there's no difference, but over time, the gap becomes undeniable because one person reacts to pressure and the other adapts to it. And adaptation is what creates long-term success. Now here's the shift. Stop expecting the path to be easy. Start expecting it to challenge you, because when you expect difficulty, you prepare for it. You don't get surprised. You don't get discouraged. You stay steady, and that steadiness is your advantage. Now let me give you something powerful. Consistency is not about never falling. It's about always getting back up. Because perfection is impossible, but persistence is a choice. Now here's a practical way to build resilience. Create a recovery system, not just a success system, because success is easy to maintain. Recovery is where most people fail. So ask yourself, what will I do when I lose momentum? How will I respond when things don't go as planned? What is my strategy for getting back on track? Because having that plan changes everything. Now, when you slip, you don't spiral. You recover quickly, efficiently, without emotion, without overthinking, and that's what keeps you moving forward. Now, here's the deeper layer. Resilience is not just external. It's internal. It's how you talk to yourself, how you interpret challenges, how you frame setbacks, because your mindset shapes your response, and your response shapes your results. If you see difficulty as failure, you stop. If you see it as feedback, you adjust, and that shift changes everything. Now pause for a moment, because this is where your identity evolves. You're no longer someone trying to improve. You're someone who adapts, who persists, who continues no matter what. And that identity is powerful because it carries you through moments where motivation disappears. Now ask yourself this: when things get hard, do you stop or do you adapt? Because that answer defines your future, not your plans, not your ideas, your response to pressure. Now, as we move into the next chapter, we're going to take this even further because resilience keeps you in the game. But there's something else that allows you to actually win: positioning. Because it's not just about working hard or staying consistent. It's about being in the right place, doing the right things at the right time. And once you understand positioning, you stop fighting the system and start using it. Chapter 18, Positioning. You can work hard, stay disciplined, build systems, stay consistent, and still struggle if you're positioned incorrectly, because effort alone does not guarantee progress. Direction matters, environment matters, timing matters, and in a world shaped by inflation, positioning becomes one of the most powerful advantages you can build. Now let's break this down. Imagine two people, both disciplined, both focused, both executing daily. But one is building something that grows with the system, and the other is building something that stays static. At first, they look the same effort, same time, same commitment. But over time, the results separate because one is aligned with growth and the other is fighting against it. That's positioning. It's not just about what you do, it's about where you place your effort, because not all effort is equal. Some effort multiplies, some effort maintains, and some effort fades. Now here's the truth. Most people never stop to consider. The system is always moving. Industries evolve, opportunities shift, value changes, and if you don't adjust your positioning, you get left behind. Not because you're not working, but because you're working in the wrong direction. Now pause for a moment, because this is where awareness deepens. Ask yourself, is what I'm building growing with the world or staying behind it? Because that answer matters more than how hard you work. Now, here's the shift. You need to start thinking in alignment, not just effort. Alignment means placing your time, energy, and focus into areas that expand, that evolve, that grow over time. Because when you align with growth, your effort compounds. And when your effort compounds, you move ahead. Now, here's something powerful. Hard work in the wrong direction is still the wrong direction. And most people never question their direction. They stay where they are because it feels familiar, comfortable, safe. But comfort can quietly hold you back because the world doesn't stay comfortable. It moves, and if you don't move with it, you fall behind. Now, this doesn't mean chasing trends, jumping from one thing to another. That's not positioning, that's reacting. Positioning is intentional, it's thoughtful, it's strategic, it's choosing a path that has long-term growth potential and committing to it. Now here's where it becomes practical. Start observing. Where is value increasing? Where is demand growing? Where are opportunities expanding? Because those are signals, clues, indicators of where the system is moving, and when you align with those signals, you position yourself ahead, not by luck, but by awareness. Now let's connect this back to your life, your skills, your work, your focus. Are they aligned with growth or just maintaining stability? Because stability without growth is vulnerable. Now here's the next layer. Positioning is not just external, it's internal. It's how you see yourself. Because if you see yourself as someone who just works, you limit your thinking. But if you see yourself as someone who builds, creates, adapts, you expand your possibilities. And that identity changes your decisions. Now let me give you something to hold on to. Don't just work hard, work where it matters, because effort without positioning is exhausting. But effort with positioning is powerful. Now here's a simple shift you can start making. Look at what you're currently doing and ask, does this move me forward or just keep me busy? Because being busy is not the same as progressing, and most people confuse the two. Now imagine this. You stay consistent, disciplined, focused, but you also align your effort with growth, with opportunity, with expansion. That combination is unstoppable because now you're not just working hard, you're working smart, you're working strategically, you're working in a direction that compounds, and that's how you move ahead in a system that never stops moving. Now, as we move into the next chapter, we're going to take everything you've learned and start turning it into a personal strategy. Because awareness is powerful, but strategy is what creates results. We're going to talk about how to build your own system, your own path, your own approach that protects you and positions you in a world where inflation is constant, because the truth is, you don't need to follow someone else's plan. You need to build your own. Chapter 19, your personal strategy. At this point, you see the system. You understand the pressure. You feel the patterns. And most importantly, you've changed the way you think. But now comes the real question. What do you do with all of this? Because awareness without strategy creates frustration. You see more, but you don't move differently. And that gap between knowing and doing is where most people stay stuck. So now, we build your strategy, not a generic one, not something copied, not something that works for someone else's life. Your strategy, built around your reality, your time, your goals, your direction. Because the truth is, there is no one path that fits everyone, but there are principles that work for anyone. And when you apply those principles to your own situation, that's where real power begins. Now let's simplify this. Your personal strategy needs 3 layers: protection, growth, expansion. And each layer serves a different purpose. The first, protection. This is your foundation. This is where you stabilize your life, control your spending, build awareness, create a buffer, not out of fear, but out of strength. Because when you are protected, you don't panic. You don't react emotionally. You stay steady. And stability creates clarity. Now the second layer, growth. This is where you build skills, knowledge, opportunities. This is where you invest in yourself. Because the most valuable asset you have is not your money. It's your ability to create more of it. And when that ability grows, your entire life shifts. Now the third layer, expansion. This is where leverage lives. This is where you create systems, streams, assets, things that grow beyond your direct effort. This is where you stop trading time and start building something that scales. Now here's the key. Most people try to jump straight to expansion. They skip protection. They ignore growth. and they build on a weak foundation. And when pressure hits, everything collapses. So don't rush. Build it in layers, step by step, because strong foundation create sustainable growth. Now let's make this practical. Start with protection. Look at your current situation, your income, your spending, your habits. Where are you losing control? Where is money leaking? Where are decisions automatic instead of intentional? Because fixing those leaks is your first win. And small wins build momentum. Now move to growth. Ask yourself, what skill can I build that increases my value? Not 10 skills, not everything, one. Something aligned with your direction, and commit to it daily, consistently, because that skill will open doors, create opportunities, increase income, and shift your trajectory. Now expansion. This comes next, not later, not someday, but after you've built a base. Ask yourself, how can I turn my effort into something that continues to work? A system, a project, a stream, something that grows over time. And start small, because small beginnings lead to big outcomes. Now here's where everything connects. Protection gives you stability. Growth gives you power. Expansion gives you freedom. And when those three align, you create a life that adapts, a life that moves forward, no matter what the system does. Now let me give you something powerful to carry. Don't wait for the perfect plan. Build a working one, because perfection delays, but action creates clarity. Now ask yourself this, what is your next step? Not everything, just the next step, because progress is not about doing everything at once. It's about moving forward consistently. Now, this is where your journey becomes personal, because from here, it's not about listening anymore. It's about applying, executing, building, and becoming. Now, as we move into the next chapter, we're going to go even deeper, because strategy creates direction. But there's something else that determines your long-term success: your environment, the people around you, the information you consume, the influences you allow into your life. Because whether you realize it or not, your environment is shaping your decisions every single day. And if you don't control it, it will control you. Chapter 20, Environment. You think you're making your own decisions, that your choices are yours, that your habits come from you. But look closer, because your environment is shaping more than you realize. The people you listen to, the content you consume, the conversations you engage in, the spaces you spend your time in, all of it is influencing how you think, how you act, how you decide. And in a world driven by inflation, your environment can either push you forward or quietly hold you back. Now let's make this real. Imagine two different environments. In one, people complain about rising prices. They focus on problems. They react emotionally. They feel stuck. And they reinforce that feeling in each other. In the other, people talk about solutions. They think in strategy. They build. They adapt. They focus on growth. Same world, same inflation, completely different outcomes. Why? Environment. Because your environment doesn't just affect your mood, it affects your standards. What you accept, what you expect, what you believe is possible. And those beliefs shape your actions. Now, here's the truth most people ignore. You become what you surround yourself with. Not instantly, not dramatically, but gradually, consistently, day after day. Now think about your current environment. What are you exposed to daily? Is it building you or draining you? Is it pushing you forward or keeping you comfortable? Because comfort can be dangerous, not because it feels bad, but because it feels good, while keeping you stuck. Now here's the shift. You need to become intentional about your environment, not just physically, but mentally. Because even if you can't change where you are, you can change what you allow in, what you listen to, what you watch, what you read. Because information is one of the most powerful influences in your life. And in today's world, you are constantly consuming. But the question is, what are you consuming? Because if you're feeding your mind noise, you get distraction. If you're feeding your mind negativity, you get fear. But if you're feeding your mind growth, you get clarity, direction, momentum. Now let's connect this back to inflation, because this is where it becomes powerful. Inflation creates pressure, uncertainty, noise. And if your environment amplifies that noise, you feel overwhelmed, you feel stuck, you react. But if your environment filters that noise and replaces it with clarity, you stay focused, you stay calm, you stay in control. And that difference changes everything. Now here's something to carry with you. Your environment doesn't just reflect your life, it shapes it. So if you want a different outcome, you need to build a different environment. Now this doesn't mean cutting people off aggressively. It means being selective, intentional, aware, because not everyone around you is aligned with where you're going, and that's okay. But you need to protect your direction. Now here's a simple shift you can start immediately. Audit your environment, your inputs, your influences. Ask yourself, is this helping me grow or keeping me where I am? And if it's not helping you, reduce it, replace it, upgrade it, because every small change creates a ripple effect. Now imagine this. You surround yourself with growth, with clarity, with people and ideas that push you forward. Over time, your thinking changes, your standards rise, your actions evolve, and your results follow. Because environment shapes identity, and identity shapes everything. Now, as we move into the next chapter, we're going to take this even deeper, because environment influences you. But there's something even more powerful: your beliefs, the internal rules you live by, the assumptions you make, the limits you accept. Because whether you realize it or not, your beliefs are controlling your financial reality. And if those beliefs are not aligned with growth, they will keep you stuck, no matter how hard you try. So the question becomes, what do you believe about money? About success? About your own potential? Because that answer is shaping your life right now. Chapter 21. Beliefs. Everything you've done so far, every decision, every habit, every action has been shaped by something deeper, something invisible, something most people never question: your beliefs. Not what you say you believe, but what you actually operate from. Because there's a difference. You can say, I want to grow, I want more, I want freedom. But if deep down you believe money is hard to get, success is not for people like me, I'm not ready, then your actions will follow that belief, not your words. And that's where most people stay stuck, not because they lack effort, but because they're operating from limiting beliefs. Now, let's make this real. Imagine two people in the same situation, same income, same environment, same opportunities. But one believes, I can figure this out, I can grow, I can adapt. And the other believes, this is just how life is. It's getting harder, I can't do much about it. Same reality, completely different outcomes. Why? Belief. Because belief shapes perception. Perception shapes decisions, and decisions shape your life. Now, here's the truth most people avoid. You are not limited by your circumstances. You are limited by how you interpret them, because inflation affects everyone. But not everyone responds the same way. Some people see rising prices and feel powerless. Others see rising prices and start asking better questions. How can I adapt? How can I grow? How can I position myself better? That difference starts with belief. Now, here's the deeper layer. Your beliefs are not random. They were built over time, from experiences, from environment, from what you've been told, from what you've seen. And if you never question them, they become your reality. Now pause for a moment, because this is where everything becomes personal. What do you believe about money? Do you see it as something limited or something you can create? Do you see growth as possible or unrealistic? Do you see yourself as capable or constrained? Because those answers are not just thoughts. They are instructions, and your mind follows them. Now here's the shift. You don't need to wait for your beliefs to change. You can challenge them. You can rewrite them. But it requires awareness and intention. Because if you keep operating from old beliefs, you will keep creating old results. Now let me give you something powerful. You don't rise above your beliefs. You act within them. So if you want a different outcome, you need to upgrade your beliefs. Now this doesn't mean pretending. It doesn't mean blind optimism. It means expanding your thinking, opening possibilities, allowing yourself to see more. Because once you believe something is possible, you start looking for ways to make it real. And that's where change begins. Now here's a practical shift. Start questioning your limits. Every time you think, I can't do this, pause and ask, why? Where did that belief come from? Is it true, or is it something you've accepted? Because most limits are not real. They're learned, and what is learned can be unlearned. Now imagine this. You start believing that you can adapt, that you can grow, that you can build something better. That belief changes your actions. You start trying, learning, building, and over time, those actions create results. And those results reinforce your belief. That's the cycle. But now, it's working in your favor. Now, let's connect this back to everything. Inflation tests your system, your habits, your discipline, your strategy. But most importantly, it tests your belief. Because when pressure rises, your true beliefs show. And if those beliefs are weak, you react. But if those beliefs are strong, you adapt. Now ask yourself this. When things get harder, what do you believe? Because that answer will determine everything that comes next. Now, as we move into the next chapter, we're going to bring everything together because you now understand the system, the habits, the emotions, the strategy, the environment, the beliefs. But there's one final piece that ties it all together: identity, who you see yourself as. Because at the end of the day, you don't act based on what you know. You act based on who you believe you are. And once you shift that, everything changes. Chapter 22, Identity. Everything changes. When you stop asking, what should I do? And start asking, who do I need to become? Because at the end of the day, your life does not follow your knowledge. It follows your identity, who you believe you are, because identity drives behavior, and behavior creates results. Now let's make this real. If you see yourself as someone who struggles with money, you will act accordingly. You will hesitate. You will doubt. You will play small, even if you have the right information, even if you know what to do, because your actions will always match your identity, not your intentions. Now flip that. If you see yourself as someone who adapts, who builds, who grows, your actions change. You become more intentional, more focused, more disciplined, not because it's forced, but because it aligns with who you are. And that alignment is powerful. Because when identity and action match, consistency becomes natural. Now, here's the truth. Most people never realize you are already acting from an identity right now. Every decision you make is reinforcing it. Every habit, every choice, every reaction is either strengthening or weakening the version of you that you're becoming. Now pause for a moment, because this is where everything becomes clear. Who are you right now, financially? Not what you want to be, not what you hope to become, but who are you today? Are you someone who reacts or someone who decides? Are you someone who spends unconsciously or someone who directs money intentionally? Are you someone who waits or someone who builds? Because that answer is shaping your reality. Now here's the shift. You don't change your life by changing everything at once. You change your life by changing how you see yourself. Because once your identity shifts, your actions follow naturally. Now let me give you something powerful. You don't get what you want, you get what you are. And if you want a different outcome, you need to become a different version of yourself. Not dramatically, not overnight, but intentionally, step by step. Now, here's how you start. You define it clearly. Who do you need to become to stay ahead in a world of inflation? Someone disciplined, someone focused, someone strategic, someone who builds. Now, once you define that identity, you act like it daily, not perfectly, but consistently, because identity is not declared once. It's reinforced daily through action. Now, here's the deeper layer. You don't wait to feel ready. You don't wait to become that person. You act first, and through action, you become, because identity is built, not assigned. Now, here's your contract with yourself. Not with me, not with anyone else, with yourself. A decision that says, I will not stay the same. I will not ignore what I now understand. I will build. I will grow. I will adapt. I will move forward, no matter what. Because that decision is where everything begins. Now, if something in this audiobook resonated with you, if a line hit you, if a moment made you pause, then don't let it fade. Take one action today, just one, because that one action is the start of everything. And if you're serious about this journey, make it visible. Commit to it. You can even write it down or share it, because when you declare something, you give it weight. Now, if this message moved you, share it with someone who needs it, because awareness is one of the most powerful things you can give. And most people are still unaware, still stuck, still reacting. And one conversation, one insight can change everything. Now, as you move forward, remember this. You are not behind. You are not stuck. You are not limited. You are becoming aware. And awareness is where power begins, but only if you use it. So move, build, execute, and become the version of yourself that no system can hold back. Because in the end, inflation doesn't decide your future. You do. And that is the truth most people never realize until it's too late. Make sure it's not too late for you.